If you're looking for a new barbell or even considering a new barbell right now, don't miss out on a limited time opportunity. Rep Fitness is offering fantastic deals on barbells, but supplies are limited. Go to repfitness.com/logic and check out the high quality, deeply discounted barbells they have. For example, their Gladiator Olympic barbell is marked down to $199 from an original $359. Oh, and you get an additional 10% off that using discount code LOGIC. So that's a $360 bar for only $180, a full 50% off. And yes, that is a 20 kilo, 28 millimeter standard Olympic bar. And that's not all, friends. There's free shipping on all orders within the United States. So why not check out some of their other equipment like plates, the best flat bench on the market, power racks, or any of their specialty bars. Everything they make is high quality. There has never been a better time to grab a barbell if you hurry. Go to repfitness.com/logic. That's repfitness.com/logic. And be sure to use discount code LOGIC for an additional 10% off already discounted barbells. Do not miss this opportunity. You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Ahoy, everybody. I am CJ Gocher, director of the Barbell Academy, where passionate lifters and aspiring strength coaches grow their knowledge and skill. With me is Niki Sims, the Chief Experience Officer and exclusive coach at Barbell Logic.
Hey,
how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, man. Pretty good. One of those high friction technology days again.
High friction technology days. That is, that's a good start. That's going to be in my vocabulary.
How are you this morning?
I am doing fantastic, actually.
Right.
We had a good time. We took our toddler Dylan to the safari park yesterday, which was
rad.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then I'm prepping for a big endurance event. It's a 24-hour event-ish, followed by a 12-hour, followed by a 6-hour. It's a Go Ruck event. I think Matt did a podcast on that a while ago. So yeah, it's going to be fun. What's that?
When is your event?
Oh, it starts on Friday. So it runs from Friday through Sunday.
Man, I hope that goes well. Good luck, dude.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well is relative. It's going to suck, but that's kind of the point.
Enjoy the suck. That's what they say, right?
I've actually been looking, maybe we'll talk about this one day. I've been looking a lot at doing a lot more conditioning, reintegrating that back in my training from years ago when that was kind of the primary focus of my training. It's been a blast.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Lots of stuff to learn from that.
But what we're talking about today is you. So for those who have been listening to the podcast for quite some time, Niki is usually, the host of the podcast, kind of navigating things, the MC of sorts. But today, I would actually like to interview you. Specifically, you've had not just a lot of experience as a coach and a lot of experience in general helping other people with injuries, but you've been dealing with a little something for a while now.
Yes.
We talked about it during when we had Becca on for lifting with back pain, and it came up a little bit, your personal experience, but it's been going on for long enough, and I've seen so many interesting insights and tidbits from you on the grams, the Instagrams.
Learning a lot.
Yeah. So if I could just to open that up then, what happened? If you were to go this whole back adventure started, what would you call the start?
Okay, so we're going to focus on, if you want to talk about shoulder stuff, I also have that. So we can talk about shoulder injury as well.
Yeah.
And knee stuff.
Let's
I've got
talk
back,
about
shoulder, knee, all those things.
Well, and I see posts that you have going back to 2021 where you're my BJJ shoulder, my back I've got cranky back. So let's include both. When did you start noticing this is affecting my training? This is something that I'm having to adjust to.
There was an event that I could potentially tie the back stuff back to, which is May of 2020, where there was something that happened in a workout during a deficit deadlift where there was like a pop and a sensation, and then a kind of pattern of performance changing and more sensitivity while lifting. And it was since then that I had to start really kind of training a bit differently and noticed some performance drop in my deadlift. Fortunately, I was able to squeeze out a squat PR before things really went south, which is great.
Right?
Yeah.
At least I got that one.
At least I got my 300. I can die happy. But yeah, May 2020 is when things really started to change. And then there was another event in August of 2021, actually at our conference, while it was the night before our really big day. We had our lifting competition. I was giving, I think, 2 presentations that next day, and I was sleeping and I woke up in total pain. It was that feeling, I guess, that people speak of when their back goes out. And I just woke up with like, like can't see straight, can't move without pain. I was like in a hotel room and no one had access to me and I like couldn't move. So I was like also freaking out about what's going to happen. And when I could move, it hurt so bad. I was like dry heaving and it went on. I was like trying to get comfortable and to like find some relief for hours. And so I like didn't sleep that night. And then this is my personality. I lifted in the lifting competition later that day. I don't know. That was a good thing.
As you do. You do.
I wore heels and gave presentations. But that was like the moment of the most pain and the most kind of, oh crap. And then performance really took a significant dive after that moment. That was August of 2021. So it's been pretty interesting since then.
So on the one hand, as I listen, I'm like, this has been a long process. This has been kind of a long story for you. On the other hand, you've been training for a long, long time.
Oh yeah, I never stopped training. That was
even not just after, but before then as well. So before this, is this what you would consider the most like serious interruption to your training? Where I know those few people that I'm almost like jealous of. They're like, yeah, that tweaks. They don't really happen to me. Like whatever.
Yeah.
They're rare. And I'm like, you're lying to me. But was this something you dealt with in the past before, before this issue for you?
Like the biggest setback to my training was this weird knee injury that I experienced when I was like rushing to get into a cab in New York City, trying to make it to a train to go teach at a seminar. And it was like this ridiculous moment where it was pouring rain. I held a cab. I had my suitcase. This other woman got in the cab too. And we like looked at each other and we were like, this is my cab. And like, I was running so late that we both just decided to share it. But I threw my suitcase in, wrenched both my legs and then twisted my knee. Then I had a knee injury for, I think it was like 8 to 10 weeks where I couldn't squat and barely could deadlift. And so that was like the first of my lifting difficulties. And then I think one of the biggest things that happened was I turned 35. So, your body just really tries to go south after that point. And I started jujitsu. So it was like hammering jujitsu, hammering training, aging, and that all kind of converged in 2020. And I think that's where it wasn't one of that like quick bounce back things anymore. And I think I've learned, like, I think I know that there are some things I would have done differently looking back, but you don't know until you know. Hindsight.
So I love to get to that in a second, because a lot of what interests me is what you've learned. Just pulling back the history of it, I'm always struck how often coaches, are like, well, I have a, solution to injury, or, well, the program that I've been following, I haven't gotten hurt. My clients don't get hurt, all that. And that strikes me as a moment there where I'm just like, yet.
Yeah.
Like if you do it long enough, if you train seriously long enough, pursuing greater maxes, greater increases in weight, you're trying to see progress over time. You're consistently doing it. It feels almost like an inevitability that is something you're going to have to work through and have to process.
Yeah. And I think that can really be more so if you're really trying to compete. Like I really was pushing myself super hard. So I was in the zone of pushing my limits, and I was, doing jujitsu, up to 7 times a week and lifting 4 times a week, which is really redlining. And so if you're going to put yourself into the red like that, and really if you're in your mid 30s or later, it becomes definitely not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And I think that's different if you aren't, redlining like that. I think it'll probably happen. You'll get some sort of tweak. Something's going to happen. I agree with you, but you just are increasing your chances if you're really pushing into that zone.
Yeah. Let's talk, because with jiu-jitsu, of course, it's not just like that something went sideways in a lift, it was an angle, like someone is actively trying to hurt you. And
exactly.
this is a choreographed, harm. Like but somebody is trying to, I must break you, to steal from Rocky IV. Okay. So you mentioned you've learned a lot. And part of that was I was redlining it. I was pushing really hard. I wore heels and lifted the day the day of a crippling back wake up.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind, not what you would do, but besides lifting, like immediately after, what were your first changes and your first thoughts? Maybe let's go back to the at the block party when you had the moment then.
Yeah.
What were kind of the first thoughts and modifications that you made to your training and your approach?
So at that point, I was really operating under the kind of theory of, it's fine. Just keep training. It's probably going to go away. You can still move. Like I went through the red flags. Like there wasn't any numbness. Like I still had bladder control. So like the red flags were okay. Like I passed that test. So my mindset then was, well, let's just modify the weights and the frequency and keep training and, play with the range of motion. So the typical kind of protocol of find the space where it doesn't hurt and work within that space and then build up from there. So those are the first things we changed. Like we started doing block pulls, lightened the weight on squats. I think I was really feeling it the most on squats, actually. Started to get there. And so I would just kind of, this is a character flaw, I think. It's like I wasn't ready to stop pushing. And so whenever there was a day where I felt okay, I pushed. And
so it was still, you were still training really specific. It was still squats, deadlifts, bench press, chins, is all sort of the stuff that you'd always been doing.
Well, jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
And on top of lots of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And you made those initial changes, lighten the weight, change the range of motion. But otherwise you were still staying pretty close to barrel. And it sounds like it was very much like, keep going, well, this will pass.
Yeah.
Just navigate the intensity and you'll come out the tunnel on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I thought I was doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's more than fair.
Yeah.
And so I love to get in here, and I'll put a pin in it, to what you would have changed. But obviously that strategy, that approach, which sometimes works, especially, like you said, when you're 25, when you're, it wasn't working now. It didn't work this time.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
So I got to a point where I was having more and more days in pain at the gym. Every time I walked into my gym, I was in pain. And it got to a point where just looking at my lifting shoes, pain would increase. And so I really started reinforcing this pattern of going to the gym equals hurting. And it was getting really frustrating. I would try to lift and the weights I was able to lift were getting lower and lower and lower. So pain was screaming, frequency of pain was high, and ability to perform was decreasing. So,
and it sounds like when you say like you were looking at your weightlifting shoes and the pain would increase, sounds like there's maybe some anxiety too, or some as hesitance around gym. Like, I know it's going to hurt, so it just hurts me.
Yeah, like they really started to turn into that relationship of, you experience pain in your body for a reason, but then also your brain just gets really interwoven and you start experiencing pain before there's even a force that you're dealing with or a movement that you're dealing with. There's just the pain signal was starting earlier and it was more often. And so
something had to change.
Something had to change. And I was working with Jordan Stanton, who was great. He got me to my 300-pound squat. It was awesome. But I was feeling like I couldn't compete in anything. And I really wanted to work with a coach who had a bit more rehab kind of experience. And that's why I reached out to Becca because, as we've spoken to her before, she has some more specific training in that arena. So I wanted to just and I love Jordan. I highly recommend him. I think he's great. But there's sometimes there gets to this moment where it's like you said, I needed a change. And I thought maybe a fresh start would be good for me to kind of start approaching it differently because I wasn't doing such a good job approaching it differently on my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. Like there's not just the ideas that the client has or the ideas that the coach has, but we end up getting into a flow of things as a coach client kind of a pattern that even when, the coach is doing all the right steps, they're doing everything we ask them to, and everything that kind of fits for how we've communicated in the past and everything. It's just that combined Niki Jordan, the combined,
Yes.
Client coach, wasn't getting you where you wanted to be. And a lot of that could be just, I need something new.
Yeah. You summed that up so beautifully. It was the momentum I had created and the expectations I put on myself that I wasn't operating well within. And so I needed kind of a new kind of external input to help me recalibrate myself. Yeah.
So you ended up, and this is something that I'm actually really grateful that I've done this myself. Had a couple of different coaches within Block, where when that relationship just needs to shift, but I like barbell training. I like, this is what I want to do. You can change from one coach to another as a Block client, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Request a different, and then hopefully find someone who matches better towards that direction that you're moving in.
Yeah.
And so you found Becca. And she obviously, so she's a physical therapy assistant. She has talked on this podcast several times about injuries, recently talked about back pain specifically. So convenient.
It's perfect.
What changed there? So how did the new Niki Becca combination change what you did?
I wish I had gone back into my training log and looked at a lot of more specific things, but we started, we really took out normal squats and deadlifts pretty significantly. And up until that point, I had been working on leg hypertrophy work because since I was seeing my ability to squat decrease, my ability to deadlift decrease, I still wanted to make sure I was getting some sort of training in. So I would start doing more isolation exercises. So in addition to that, we started doing different kinds of squats. We did lots of goblet squats. We did some more abdominal work to kind of see how my back could be loaded differently. And her theory was that leaning over was just not a good place for it to be. There was always this kind of freaking out with it leaning over. And I should say, I never got an MRI because I am cheap. We're probably getting to that point where I'm going to do it, but I'll do it at the start of the year, just like deductible excuses. So to her credit, she's done such a wonderful job navigating all my symptoms without really knowing what's going on. But we did kind of decide that leaning over and doing things was challenging. So let's do as many things as we can upright. So we worked on goblet squats. We worked on loading my spine with compression with overhead work, like getting in just some waiter's carries and farmer's walks and starting to just see what my spine could handle loading in way more compression than moment. And that was different because it was all these new exercises I've never heard of before, really weird names, and just hardly much barbell work.
And I don't know if this is a trend or if it's just something you're good at. I've seen a lot more chins on your Instagram. So has that been a new focus for you? Because you're talking loading and compression, changing the direction of force. Was it just tension doesn't hurt at all? And I like chin ups, so let's focus on this? Or does it just happen to be that's what makes the gram?
It was one of those lifts that I could do that didn't hurt. And because even benching was hurting because going into really hard extension was creating a spasm. So even bench was a little bit held back. So chin up.
I've seen you doing a lot more floor press.
Yeah, lots of floor press, which that had to do with shoulder stuff and with back stuff. Yeah, floor press is one of my new favorite variations. So she helped me see and I really admire her skill in this, is she has a lot of different exercises to incorporate when the main ones aren't an option. So she'll kind of even progressively overload those in terms of weight, difficulty, and variation in order to see in order to just like slowly, gradually build on the ability to get towards a squat or towards a deadlift in completely different ways. You have to get less and less specific the more and more kind of sensitized you are. And so she had lots of good ideas for getting very unspecific to squatting and deadlifting, but would eventually get us back to that point, and benching too, if that makes sense. So we started doing a lot more weird exercises.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially who listen to this podcast, would probably hear that and be like, that's lesser training.
Right.
It's not as good. It's compromised training. If I could, I pulled from I was looking through your Instagram for comments and reflections that you had and posted in the past. And you said something I thought was really neat. You said, while my training looks very different, I still train 4 to 5 times per week. I've actually put on muscle mass, even though at this point you're doing fewer of the core 4, the specific barbell lifts. And I've done more focused ab training than ever before. I care about training and building muscle, and I act like it. My actions and the amount on the weight on the bar are just different now.
Yeah, that actually is still true to this day, which is cool. Becca asked me this one time. She was like, how do you keep showing up for this? Because it's been really difficult. It's been emotionally challenging. It's been literally painful. And you kind of always just wonder, like, why do you keep doing this? Like, you could just not train anymore. That sounds like it'd be a better option. But I am so deeply committed to gaining muscle as I age and not losing muscle as I age that I was going to do it in some way. And it wasn't with the barbell for a while, but like, there's still the habit of like spending time in the gym, exerting force in one way or another, which has allowed me to learn a lot of new things about training and kind of finding the bigger picture level of importance and then breaking everything up into like smaller blocks, which Becca's really helped me with. And I think that's really important when people are injured because you start to feel like a failure. And for me, it was like a huge identity crisis. It was like, I'm this competitive lifter, I'm a strength coach, I want to compete in jiu-jitsu. And now like a lot of what I do is painful. And I'm just like, having a hard time deadlifting 135. So you kind of have to really see yourself, or you have to see that this is just a phase of your training. It wasn't the direction that you wanted to go down. But you're still like, I'm still doing work towards my main picture goal of making sure I have muscle as I age. And that's been useful to kind of stay focused on.
There was that point you were making the shift in your programming away from the barbell lifts towards other things while you were, because you were just so sensitized and the training experience itself was just sucking. At some point, you stopped doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so I took some time off jiu-jitsu. I think it was like December of last year to see if that would be helpful because, it's unpredictable. Like lifting is super predictable. It's bilateral. You control the range of motion. You control the weight. But in jiu-jitsu, like you're really getting cranked into really challenging positions. Like you said earlier, the goal is to like make someone's joint uncomfortable and painful enough that they submit. And there were like, I wanted to experiment with taking out that factor to see if things would improve. And they did after like 6 months.
And so was that more, in your mind, was that more a shoulder thing, a back thing, an all thing? It's just, I would like to experiment with this variable and just not being beat up in general.
Yeah. At that time it was back related. My shoulder got into a pretty good point then. And there's also like the training stress where, if you look at your ability to train per week, even just that 1 or 2 sessions might be enough to start the pain pattern. Like, I don't know if I'm describing this well, but like, I would feel great at jiu-jitsu. No pain at all. but for the whole day and 24 hours after, hobbling around. And so it was challenging because I felt so good while doing jujitsu, but it was not helping my lifting or my recovery at all. So I kind of had to be like, all right, what will benefit from me taking this out for a little while? And when can I put it back in?
And I loved another comment on the Instagram that you made. The Instagram. No, but you said, fortunately, I protected myself from myself by getting a coach who holds me accountable. Because you had wanted to, because of that feeling, like while I'm rolling, while I'm doing jujitsu, I feel great, but it's not working for me yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And Becca was really good about making me set really specific goals and helping me really prioritize, like, is this more important than this? Like, is getting back to jujitsu for community better, is more important than getting your deadlift up? Like, helping me really kind of be real about the priorities. Because I know as a coach, you want to be like, yeah, we can do all of that. Let's do all of that. But when there's clearly something that's stealing from another, when there's one activity that's stealing from goals, you have to really get real about what you want to prioritize on. There were several times and I was like, I think I want to start putting jujitsu back in. And she's like, let's hold on another 3 weeks. I'd be like, fine.
So that's a question then that I have for you in your thought process and your collaboration with Becca in solving this problem. Several times you've mentioned that you were doing less barbell work or no barbell work for a while. You know, there's this feeling of yet, and I've seen you recently doing squats again. I've seen you recently doing some lifts, and you even mentioned that there's this feeling of, okay, wait another 3 weeks. So what were, as you peek into your black box, as we talk about in the academy, kind of trying to understand our thought processes for why we make decisions, what triggered you to start doing barbell lifts again? Like, what told you that it was safe? And what are you looking for? Like, what's your trigger for, okay, I'm willing to do jujitsu again?
Okay. So going back to when would it be okay to start doing barbell stuff? That was a lot of kind of really seeing how the lifts felt on that day. Like, I wanted to get them back in because I believe barbell training is really, really, really effective. Like, you know, there are only so many times I can stay motivated for 3x10 leg extensions, and doing 3x5 squats is just so much more effective. So I was really eager to, be more efficient with my training. So I wanted to get that back in. And also I really love deadlifting. So that was just something that I wanted back in my training. But there would be like a weight or a rep that would, for me, it's a pop, and then there's a spasm, and I've learned ways to calm that spasm down, but sometimes the pop and the spasm will stay around for a long enough time that it was not worth that one set of 5 at 75 pounds. So it was like, how can I navigate that lift to where I'm no longer experiencing that pop and that spasm? And if I do experience it, I know how to calm it down immediately, and it doesn't impact the next 24 hours. So just kind of testing the waters over and over.
It wasn't like, oh, it's going to be this amount of time or this weight on the bar. You're experiencing like on a daily basis, like each set by set, like this is the weight on the bar. I'm adding tens. How am I feeling? Is sort of just feeling it out?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would sneak it in sometimes because, like, if goblet squats felt good, I was like, okay, let's try a front squat. Let's try a back squat. And Becca would have me do RDLs, which is like, okay, if that's feeling good, let's try a touch and go deadlift or touch and go kind of RDL and see how that feels. So we got from our, like I was saying earlier, our really not or less specific exercises, we would kind of let them gauge or use them to test the waters to try the more specific barbell exercise to see if it would work. And sometimes it didn't at all, at all. And then sometimes it was okay. And that was another important learning, is that like the days are very different. Because it was a total disaster one day, it could be really good the next time. And because it was really good one time, still means it could be a total disaster the next time.
Well, and this has been a long process. I mean, you're going back all the way to May 2020, and then obviously, the peak event, August 2021. So this has been,
it's like 2.5
over a
years.
year at least of navigating these different solutions. So you've had as frustrating as that has been, you've had a lot of opportunities to play into that space a little bit and see what happens. Where do you feel you are now? Like, are you able to consistently get a barbell on your back, like consistently train that way? Or is it still very much in that exploring on a day-to-day basis space?
It's definitely still in that zone, but it has gotten quite a bit better. We started tracking morning kind of pain, and lack of mobility is really what it feels like. And watching that metric change has been really useful. Because consistently for the last year and a half, I wake up just super stiff and sometimes can't even, bend over because it's just so much spasming. So kind of seeing that metric improve has been a good indicator of whether or not we should incorporate some more barbell training. And actually what's worked really well is I kind of just took over my leg training, I call it, where I do leg work, because having a set program for a squat and a deadlift was actually becoming really stressful again, because I just would feel like a failure, or it would just I would see how many times I couldn't squat. And so now I'm kind of in the driver's seat of you know what, this feels good. I'll do it today. It feels okay, without this pressure that Becca never put on me, but I'll put on myself.
Funny how that works, right? The coach can say a million times, hey, this is a placeholder. These are estimates.
Right.
I've got RPEs with a 3 RPE range, whatever it is we want to say to it. But the fact that we go in that day hoping to squat and we come out not being able to squat just
guts you. Yeah.
So it's in the end, it's the expectation that we put on ourselves.
Yeah. And that was another great conversation Becca had with me, is you say things that you're not having expectations, but do another inventory, because you might actually be having some expectations of yourself that you're not totally free from yet. And that was really helpful. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned there was a big shift. There was an identity shift from I'm a competitive lifter. I'm going for these big PRs, these big goals, and I'm training 7 times a week in jiu-jitsu. That is a very aggressive physical identity. And then to where you are now, where you're still training, you're putting in as much time training, you're gaining muscle, at least in the gym. I don't know about jiu-jitsu, what's kind of filled in that time, because 7, training sessions a week is a lot. But so, and at least in terms of gym time, you're gaining muscle mass, but that had to have changed kind of your identity. When you compare where you're training now with maybe where you thought you'd be 2 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not even are they different, because of course they're different. They're always different. But are you happy with where you are now and where what you've realized about training is taking you?
That is a really important thing to address, because I can choose to go down that thought path of being really disappointed about where I am right now in my training. Because, there could have been one universe where that didn't happen, and I finally got to my goal of deadlifting 440. That is so far from where I am right now, and I could completely go down the tunnel of feeling really bummed about that. But that's kind of exhausting, and I don't want to feel that way. So instead, you really start to learn about different kinds of training. How can I continue to build muscle when so many movements that I was familiar with are off the table? So now I get to learn more about how to do that. And I am able to still really have fun with training again, which is really great, because there was such a long period of it just being, a really bad time of the day. And that's a bummer, because I love training. You kind of you go through this phase before you get injured, and you're like, I love training, it's the best. And then training becomes a really difficult chapter where you don't know what you're going to get when you go in. You have to be ready to spend the time experimenting, what's going to hurt, what's not going to hurt, what's okay, comparing where you wish you were to where you actually are. And that can become such a big drag that you can start to hate training. And so you have to kind of find a way to put the play back into it, because that's what it was before. It was my playtime. It felt really good. It felt fun to compete, put on my clothes, listen to music. And then it was this exercise of, how can I accept being weak and being in pain and transfer that into, okay, I still know what I want out of my training. How can I make sure I'm injecting that into my training routine? And kind of go through that exercise of, am I still getting my needs met with my training, even though it looks a lot different than what it could have been? But I think I would just be careful when you are tempted to go down that rabbit hole of comparing to what could have, would have, because it's a choice to go down that. And some people might find it worthwhile, but I think it can be really depressing.
It's definitely, it's so funny that you mentioned how, you know, we can create or we can go down this path. I find oftentimes like the path sort of stumbles on me. Like for me, it was the mistakes that I made that prevented me from getting a selection for a SEAL spot. And then for just at different points in my training path, like I can look at those, and every once in a while that feeling will hit. It's like an intrusive thought of like, oh, but the choice to follow that, to indulge in that, to go with that is very much something that I can choose to go down to some extent. It's like if I choose to take that first like 2 steps, then it starts, spiraling down.
Right. Yeah. And what good does it do? Maybe there's some little nugget you can glean from that little thought exercise, but I don't know if it's healthy to stay in it for a very long time. Like give yourself 10 minutes to dwell and then move on, like come back. I would always come back to the very zoomed out picture of why I like training and how am I doing that? And then how can I work in little chunks to get back to, if I want to compete in deadlifting again, what are the small chunks that I can take to get back there? And they're very small. Like, okay, how does deadlifting 95 pounds from a block feel for 4 weeks? Super, super small, but you are working towards that bigger picture goal. Yeah. And I also was thinking that it becomes really important for people who are dealing with a pain or injury to consider pain as another training variable, like volume, frequency, tonnage, pain. Because, there are some days where it's just like, it's going to hurt and it's going to feel sore and it's going to spasm a little bit, but that's okay a couple of times a week. Is it 7 times a week? Is it with every lift? Like if you're seeing the frequency and intensity of that variable increase and increase and increase, or even stay the same, particularly whatever, if it's not decreasing, that's something to keep an eye on. But I think as a coach, you have to keep that variable in mind because pain just wears on you. It's emotionally draining. It's exhausting. It influences the rest of your life. Like, we just want to be able to carry groceries from our car in one trip. And when it's harder and harder for you to do that, then you see like your quality of life decreasing instead of training, improving the quality of your life.
Yeah. It's so there's this weird cultural pressure. Like training isn't supposed to be fun. Training is supposed to hurt. You're supposed to push yourself through this. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes. A little bit. Yeah. A little bit. Like I expect to hurt some. I expect, that there will be times that are not fun and I manage that. But I'm paying to do this. Like I'm not even like getting paid to do, like I am paying to do this. Like this is recreational.
Yeah.
So if I'm always in pain and never having fun from the experience or arranging it in such a way, then what am I doing?
Right. Yeah. I had a great moment realizing that when I woke up recently and like my back didn't hurt and I wasn't spasming and I was like, oh my God, this feels so good. And I was like, what if I just felt good all the time? And like, I forgot that that's an idea that I could pursue. I was like, and I won't feel like I'm missing out on anything because I'll just feel really good. It's just like, you can just kind of deal with the suffering for so long that you actually forget that that's an option for you.
Damn, that's good. I mean, that's good. Mic drop. And there's so much we forget when we put ourselves down that path and stay there for so long. Well, Niki, Thank you so much. Like it takes a lot, at least when I look through my own training records, it takes a lot when something like this happens, especially over years, to kind of archaeologize, I guess, like to dig through and kind of pick out, what was I thinking through? What happened? What mistakes? What would I do differently? And that was kind of the last question I wanted to leave with, at least last question for me, and then leave it open for you if there's anything you want to share. But what would you do differently? Like knowing where the place that you're in now, the feeling less pain, having learned what you've learned, what would you have done differently maybe back in August, or maybe not August, because after all,
before then.
It could have fixed then. Yeah. Either actually anytime before then or after then. Cause right after the event, who knows? It could have gone away in 2 months. Like there's so much we don't know, but what would you have changed about this journey that you followed?
I think I would have taken the suggestions from Jordan to, pick a lift where you don't feel any pain. And I would have done that for a longer amount of time. Because I think like I said earlier, whenever I would have the opportunity to push and to get back to where I thought I could be, it wasn't productive. Like there is enough time for me to squat and deadlift and bench and do jujitsu, but I'm actually robbing from myself if I try and get there before the symptoms have fully kind of gone away. And I'm sure, this will be different for every, back pain is such a, diverse experience for a lot of people, but I would not have kept myself in the pain pattern for so long. I think that really set up a bad or a really non-productive experience for my training. So I would have taken the recommendation to find things that I could do without pain and let that become a sense of normalcy instead of just pushing it as soon as I as soon as I had the opportunity. So I would have really eased up on myself and been like, okay, there's going to be a time for you to get everything done. It's okay if it's not right now. So I think when your coach gives you the recommendation of, hey, we need to take a couple of weeks where it's really low stress, like do it, because I think it can be really useful. There will be time for you to rebuild and kind of get back to it. But once you kind of start to teach yourself to tolerate that kind of suffering, I don't actually think it's useful. Yeah.
Yeah. When we teach ourselves to tolerate it. Ugh, that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And be open-minded, because you're going to spend some time figuring out things that you can do and things that you can't do. And those are going to change over time. Like things that used to work really well, don't really for me anymore, and vice versa. So like give yourself the time during a training session to know that you're going to have to explore a little bit, know that it's going to be different the next day. And every time, like everything that you do to kind of experiment is useful, but just kind of like we were talking about earlier, ease up on the expectations. It's a lot more about being curious, knowing that it could be really different over time. And make sure you're creating a way for yourself to still have fun, where like I went through a time where I would just like wouldn't wear my lifting shoes anymore. I'd wear different shoes because I was like, it needs to feel different. Or like I started lifting at the Globo gym because in that environment, it's okay to do silly things and, do exercises that you think at one point were ridiculous. But in the barbell environment, you're like, no, I must do squat, bench press, deadlift. And if I don't do a low bar squats, that I'm doing suboptimal squats, and just like change your environment. Like you're going to be like breaking rules and it's freaking fine.
You're going to curl in the squat rack. Yeah. If you got a home gym, you're going to do curls in the squat rack. It's just how it's going to go.
Yeah. Like change your environment if you need to, be around different people if you need to. Like don't like put on this burden of if you don't low bar squat, you're useless. Like that's not true. There are a lot of different ways to accomplish good training, but it kind of just depends on where you are. Yeah. Thanks for your questions.
Well, thank you, Niki. I took a heck of a lot away from this. I hope our audience does. It has been a pleasure. And
thank you.
I think we've got another podcast here in about 2 weeks. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care.